It's a bleak Tuesday in November, and I've come to a windswept plot to watch somebody build a podcast.
Right, Dave, let's get this going. Here, pop these planning docs on the bonnet of the Land Rover. We need to come up with our winning sentence.
No microphone yet, no name, no artwork. Just one winning sentence.
What are we thinking, Dave? I was thinking HR Weekly. No, Dave, that's planning a title for a podcast we don't even have a sentence for yet.
Everything else gets built off the back of it, and nothing gets bought until it is.
Yeah, that's the bit nobody does. Everybody buys the microphone first and then finally decides to discuss where the podcast is going in a strategy meeting 30 episodes in during an afternoon that nobody wants to be there. Cadence, length, format, video, not video, all of those are construction details. Construction details are only right or wrong in accordance with a wider plan. You know, there's never been anything wrong with publishing weekly. There's only ever been something wrong with publishing weekly because someone told you to without knowing what your business goals are. Let's go back to that episode a couple of weeks ago where our podcaster Piers was committing a podcasting true crime. He didn't ever need to be caught. He didn't need a different microphone or a different schedule. He just needed one winning sentence. And that's what this episode is about, because most people with a B2B podcast treat it as a content marketing task with tickable boxes. But like this building those people there are now working on, it should be a structure that you've built on one winning sentence. And the truth of the matter is, if you can't write that sentence, nothing you build on top of it will hold its own weight. Welcome to B2B Podcasting Insights. I'm Neil Velio, the founder of Podnose Podcasting, a full-service podcast agency helping people like you get better results from your branded podcast. So let's talk about this one winning sentence then. What am I talking about? Well, it's very simple. Most people would approach this as a mission statement, if you will. The problem with a mission statement is it tends to be very vague. Oh, we are going to do this podcast to build brand awareness. Oh, we're going to do this podcast so that we can help our clients make a decision to work with us. Mission statements are only good or effective for the internal teams producing the podcast. They mean literally nothing for the impact and value that podcast is going to deliver to ideal clients. So there's a framework that I use when I'm working with a client who wants to launch a podcast, and when we're going through the strategy, I take them through various exercises to get them down towards this one winning sentence. And the sentence usually goes something along the lines of, this podcast exists to, brackets, change a specific belief, in, brackets, a specific person, so that, brackets, a specific commercial thing occurs. So, say for example, putting this into the real world, say you're an HR company, that sentence might then read like this. This podcast exists to give HR directors the language to win headcount arguments in rooms where finance always wins, so that when they need outside help building that case, we're the only people they think of to call. Now, figuring out whether you have a winning sentence is as simple as doing this, what I call the podcast test. Say it back. When it's said, can someone else in the team repeat it without looking at it? If the sales team can't say what the podcast is for, it isn't for anything. The second thing we need to look at is, could it ever be proven as a failure? What I mean by that is build awareness, a very common go-to reason for brands doing branded podcasts. You can never prove a podcast as failing to create brand awareness. I mean, what is the measurement of that? Is it 2 people? Is it 200 people? Is it 2 million people? Unless you get clear on how much brand awareness you want the podcast to have, you can't really decide whether or not it's failed or succeeded in that job. It's basically a horoscope prediction. A real job statement for your podcast, that winning sentence, is something that can easily be measured as succeeding or failing. The thing is, a thing that fails can be steered back on course. The other thing you need to do when it comes to coming up with a winning sentence is name one buyer it applies to. An actual human being who fits the mold of your persona deck. So, a person with a name who exists, the obvious place to go to for this is your pipeline, your spreadsheet, your CRM, whatever it is, wherever you have data collected of people that are thinking of working with you. Identify one of those and gear your content to converting them from that spreadsheet column into the one that says, yeah, they've paid us money. Do you know what? I'll even name mine Alex. Come on, Alex. Stop procrastinating. Start your bloody podcast. Alex knows who he is. So with that in mind, you're not writing a mission statement. Nobody's ever bought anything because of a mission statement. Trust me on that. You're writing an instruction that connects your podcast to your ideal client. By the way, to help you with this, the Ideal Client one-pager is the perfect tool to help you figure out the who part of this. Go to podnose.co.uk, that's podnose.co.uk/ideal-client. That's podnose.co.uk/ideal-client. So let's talk about what you actually build your podcast on once you've got that one winning sentence. I hope you figured it out. If you haven't, rewind this episode, listen back through that, and figure out what your one winning sentence is. You can't go further with this exercise until you've done that. Assuming you've done that, all right, you paused, you've done it, you've clicked play, we're back in. So your episode list for your future episodes needs to be derived from your sales call conversations, not a content calendar. Content calendars are easy to come up with. Pretty much everyone does this by going into Ahrefs or Google and typing in common questions. Okay, great. Common questions are a brilliant starting point for putting content together for your eventual ideal buyers to connect with your podcast. But you want to get specific. What are the questions the people you're actually talking to are asking? That is beyond a starting point. That is the actual bones of your podcast, or it should be. I mean, this very episode exists because I'm doing that. I'm putting that into practice. I had a call with somebody last week who asked me why I insist on going through podcast strategy with a new podcast client rather than just getting straight into production. They didn't understand what is at stake with this. There's a lot at stake. If you plan a podcast which has no obvious goal, no job, it's going to fail. Or at least it's not going to get the results that you're hoping for when you start it. And sometimes you might not even know what those results are that you're wanting in the first place because you're attached to this whole, oh, well, it's good for brand awareness, which it isn't. I mean, it is, but that should never be the job of the podcast. Once you've got that one winning sentence, you can also write your ideas for the person that you know has to justify you internally within their own offices. You can't possibly know who that's going to be until you've derived it from your one winning sentence. For example, if you know that the purpose of your podcast, based on this one winning sentence, is to help empower CEOs to ask the right questions to get the right answers from their teams so that they can keep their teams happy and improve productivity, well, that's a very different podcast from one where the plan is, let's just talk about CEO stuff and topics that are vaguely related to CEOs. It's amazing how many podcasts tend to end up doing the latter rather than the former. Once you have that one winning sentence, by the way, cadence just no longer becomes an issue at all. It's irrelevant. Once you know what the episodes are meant to do, how often you release them is just kind of not that important. The one winning sentence also can help you figure out the length, the duration of your recordings, because sometimes the amount of depth and thought the decision needs can be anchored into how long that conversation to get them through that thought needs to take. If this is a massive life-changing, business-changing decision that they need to make to work with you, then you're not going to get that covered off in 9 minutes. The one winning sentence will also help you figure out the format, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to do this as a solo podcast. you need to be able to convey to your ideal buyer everything that you can do to help them achieve what their objectives are, as demonstrated by the one winning sentence. A guest has to earn their place, and they're only going to come into the equation if they have knowledge that you certainly don't have, but you know your ideal buyers are going to want to have crossed off on their buying list. Your guest should be somebody that you can absolutely collaborate with, maybe pass referrals on to. It shouldn't be someone that just happens to know some stuff and has a huge following. And once you have your one winning sentence, here's the important thing. Your sales team needs to hear your episode before the feed does. This is the most underutilized move in B2B podcasting, and it is genuinely the secret sauce of what makes some of the biggest, most successful B2B podcasts what they are. The podcast is a sales asset that just happens to generate interest from the public. And let's be clear, we talked about best practice last week. Not one thing there is best practice. In fact, most podcast agencies won't even think about half of that stuff because their job is to get your content out there, and that's all they care about. And it all comes downstream of your winning sentence. And there's a reason why nobody can put that together as a checklist. You have to manually sit down and write that sentence. So let me be clear on this, because I understand there's probably the fear that, oh my God, that means I've got to start my podcast all over again. No, you don't need to start again. If your podcast is 60 episodes in, you're probably thinking, oh my God, I wasted over a year here. No, you haven't. And you don't even need to relaunch. Nobody tears down a brand new house that they're mid-build of just because they realise they hadn't planned the downstairs kitchen properly. Leave the back catalogue where it is and just make sure everything going forward is better planned. And the thing is as well, the back catalogue is gradually going to change meaning once you've got the added perspective of the more recent episodes, adding context to it. And some of those episodes are still going to be relevant. They're still going to be worthy of sending to prospects because hopefully you've been doing your job of informing and educating. There is still valuable content in there. What we're talking about here is just making everything more efficient and effective and getting you to the objective much more quickly. So I can understand how you're receiving this. You're probably thinking, okay, great, I do this. How will I know it's working? I need to be able to measure. Okay, good. Now you're thinking along the right lines. So how will you know it's working? Well, a prospect referencing some content, an episode, that you didn't prompt them to hear from them, well, that is definitely a sign that it's working. Maybe a sales call that starts a third of the way further along through the conversation. And the thing is, your dashboard data, your reach, your downloads, your listen through, that's all very serviceable data, very useful, but it shouldn't be the main driver of where you're going with your branded podcast. It is a great way of measuring whether or not the podcast is getting out there in the right ears. What we need to do is make sure that the right content is going into their ears in the first place. So the moral of the story here is that the podcasting true crime that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Piers, he didn't need a relaunch. He just needed somebody to pull up in their Land Rover, stick down the planning document on the bonnet and bug him into writing down that one winning sentence. My advice to you, Monday morning, send an email to the relevant members of your team, pull them into a meeting and come together to come up with that one winning sentence. And when you get it, email me and let me know what it is. neil@podnose.co.uk. All right, it's the part of the show where I deal with the correspondence that we've had, the random questions, the discovery calls, whatever it is. Members of the public who are founders asking me questions about their podcast, their planned podcast, or their podcast that they ditched out of and are considering coming back to. In this episode, we're talking about Jeremy, who runs an ops software business in Nuneaton. He says, everyone keeps telling me I need to niche down, but every time I try, I panic that I'm cutting off opportunities to do business. How do I pick? Oof, you're operating from a place of fear there, Jeremy, but that's natural and I understand it. The reason it feels impossible is that you're trying to pick a topic. But the thing is, you shouldn't be picking a topic. You should be picking a person. You should be identifying. We've already mentioned that in this episode. Identify who your ideal buyer is and anchor your content towards them. That person is going to be your ideal buyer at some point. Once you've identified that person, everything gets easier because you know what topics they're going to be listening out for and the questions they have, meaning you can answer them directly. And let me just sort of quash a myth here. Niching down doesn't cut off business. It just focuses your marketing around one particular channel for one particular buying archetype. And the rest of your people that are out there consuming your content, they still have your website, they still have your emails, they still have your LinkedIn, the whole lot. Nothing changes for them. And the chances are, if they're looking for you in those places anyway, they were never going to listen to your podcast. I mean, you've been putting your podcast out there and telling them about it, and they're still looking in those other places. So what have you got to lose by really getting down to brass tacks here and focusing on the messaging that you want to put out on your podcast to that particular buying archetype? Putting out content for people that you hope might one day decide to listen, it's not the most efficient and effective way of doing it, Jeremy. My advice on this is pick somebody whose decision takes the longest and would worry about it the most. Long, nerve-wracking decisions take longer exposure to a human reassuring voice. And that's the one thing that a podcast is uniquely good at, is connecting with somebody over a longer period of time with the human voice, verbalizing the objections and the solutions. And that's something that pretty much nothing else in your marketing is able to do. Yeah, your website blog post might be able to do a part of that job, but you're relying on them really being engaged and sticking with you through your words. And at a time when people are absolutely on top of the whole AI written content thing now, you're already against it. It's very difficult to AI the written word. I mean, sure, you can script with AI, but when somebody's having a conversation using their human voice and their human thoughts, that's a much deeper connection. I hope that was helpful, Jeremy. If you, like Jeremy, have a question regarding your branded podcast, then you can either leave me a voicemail, podnose.co.uk/voicemail, that's podknows.co.uk/voicemail, or email me directly, Neil, Neal, @podnose.co.uk. Here's this episode's quick tip. Listen back to your episodes on the worst speaker you own. Everybody checks their episode audio on their studio monitors or on a decent set of headphones, which they've become used to using because if they're an ex-radio person, then they probably got their broadcast headphones. I've got 3 or 4 pairs of Sennheisers over there that I've taken in and out of radio studios with me over the last 30 years. That is the worst possible thing to do the final check through because you're going to hear everything in superb, balanced out audio quality. What you want to do is play it out loud on something which doesn't have that technology. So obviously your phone speaker is a perfect example of this, or in your spare room while the treadmill's running, or maybe in the kitchen at 7:30 at night when the kids are running around because they're hopped up on e-numbers and they're overtired. If your content survives a phone speaker and a shower head, it'll survive absolutely anything. And you'll instantly hear any parts of the mix that aren't cutting through and getting into your ideal buyer's ears properly. I hope you found this useful. If earlier on you spent like 10 minutes mentally drafting your sentence and all you could come up with was build awareness, well, that's good. That's not writer's block. That's you discovering that the podcast never really had a job in the first place and just nobody in your building ever noticed. And if your sentence won't come out, well, that's where I come in. So you can book yourself in for a diagnostic with me. That's podnose.co.uk/diagnostic. The link is in the description. And a reminder, if you're trying to figure out your ideal client profile, then I've got the one-pager available for you to download for free. It's at podnose.co.uk/ideal-client. That's perfect if you want to have a go at it yourself first. All right, so now hopefully you've got the one winning sentence. So in the next episode, we're going to turn that into a commissioning list. We're going to talk about the 4 episodes that you're going to need to make next, where they're going to come from, and why I guarantee not one of those will be on your planned content calendar. Guarantee it. Write the sentence before you upgrade the microphone. Write it now or get someone else to help you write it. Doesn't even have to be me. And good luck with your continuing efforts to get results from your B2B podcast. See you next time.